You know, Mr. Mash, I can't believe we are on the 5th episode of this podcast, and we haven't talked about slasher movies yet.
Dude, what now? We haven't talked about slasher movies? We haven't talked about people getting decapitated, arms getting cut off, guys getting cut in half from the nuts down to the face while doing a handstand?
Listeners, you can't tell right now, but I'm shaking my head no. Negative. Negatore.
I guess we'll just have to do that today then, won't we?
For first-time listeners, I'm Mr. Bangers, also known as Zach. My co-host here is
Mr. Mash, also known as JD.
And this is the Bangers and Mash Show. Today we're going to talk about, well, it's my favorite slasher film franchise. Is it your favorite slasher film franchise, JD?
It's one of my favorites, but I wouldn't say it was my favorite.
We're talking about, of course, the Friday the 13th series. What was your first Friday the 13th movie, JD?
My first one that I can ever remember seeing was actually part 6.
My first Friday the 13th movie, I think it might have been Jason X. I was a late comer to this series, as I was to all things. Just ask my girlfriends. I was never really into slashers. I was more of a classic horror guy. When I got into slashers, though, it was a little later, and then I got into it like crazy hardcore, as I do everything. Usually drugs.
He's lying. He's not even that cool.
Why do these films appeal to you, Mr. Mash?
It's a guy that got picked on up until he died, and then he came back from the dead to kill a bunch of egotistical teenagers. Why do you think I like it so much?
I'm so glad you brought that up. These films, for nerds like us, they really are kind of revenge fantasies, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
All those cool kids, all those parties we never got invited to. Jason gets to crash, and by crash, I mean slaughter.
The heads will roll when he walks through the door.
Jason was a bullied kid. He sort of, in a weird way, represents kind of all the pent-up rage you feel as a nerd and a loser in high school.
Well, with the exception of the retard part.
I don't think Jason's retarded. I think he just was deformed. I think his behavior shows no signs of retardation. Too much planning, too much skill involved in what he does. I don't think Jason's retarded.
You know what they say, Zach? Those who are lacking in knowledge on one area tend to be really knowledgeable on another area.
You're saying Jason is a murder savant?
He could very well be.
Well, we've got a lot of films to talk about, so let's get right to it. The first film, Friday the 13th, 1980. Directed by Sean S. Cunningham. What are your favorite kills in this movie? Because it's really all about the kills, isn't it?
I have two favorite kills, which are also probably the most famous kills.
In this first movie?
In this first movie.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is where Kevin Bacon gets the arrow through the throat. That's just really cool, and the fact that they did that without CG, it's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Then, of course, at the end, when the mother gets her head cut off.
Miss Voorhees' decapitation?
Yes. Another one that I kind of liked is the first murder. I believe it's the first murder in the movie. First person stabbing.
That scene is great. When I first saw this movie, I thought the gore effects, they're still kind of shocking, truthfully.
Yeah, they are.
Here in our highly desensitized age, Annie is her name, when she gets her throat slit, it's sort of startling. You don't see it coming. And the scene later when the final girl opens the door and the guy's been pinned to the door with the arrows, that's another scene that stands out to me. It's still kind of startling. A lot of people don't realize this, but Friday the 13th, this first one anyway, owes a lot to the Italian giallo films, because those movies often showed from the killer's first-person perspective and sort of put the audience in the part of the killer. Now, it lacks a lot of the other elements from giallo. There are no cops in this movie. There are no political plot lines, but the first-person perspective, I think they probably stole it from that. A lot of people don't realize how influential Italian horror was on a lot of the great 70s horror films that so form the basis for our fandom of genre. Now, I read an interesting thing once. Let me tell you about this. Somebody was comparing the 4 big slasher franchises, which are
Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
You got them. They were saying Halloween is a middle America, small town urban legend. It's the house everybody avoids when they go through town. Nightmare on Elm Street is upper middle class, white, suppression and depression, teenage angst. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is pretty simple. It's barbecue, it's mystique, it's Texas heat, it's don't mess with Texas. But Friday the 13th is a campfire story. It's East Coast, it's summer fun and drugs. You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Do you think there's any basis in that, or am I just talking out my asshole?
No, I can see where it could be like a campfire story, so to speak. You know, even when you see movies that have like the campfire stories, they're basically Jason.
Yeah, a lot of them. Even in part 2, tell Jason's tale as a campfire story. Any thoughts on the score here?
I like the...
Now, you do know what that is, right? I mean, you know, for the benefit of our audience.
What it is the sound effects guy put a microphone on echo and went, "Ki-ma."
Yeah, it's kill the mommy, kill the mommy. Honestly, the sound effects are classic, but the rest of the score is pretty much a blatant ripoff of the Bernard Herrmann score from Psycho. Lots of shrieking strings and wee wee in this.
Yeah.
And of course, this original movie was a total independent film. It's really kind of scuzzy. The guys have body hair, and everybody's...
Well, that's the same thing with Halloween.
Yeah, everybody's unpolished. This is really a lot rougher movie. This film, Sean S. Cunningham, the director of this movie, also produced Wes Craven's Last House on the Left, which is an incredibly sleazy, scuzzy 70s grindhouse movie. Of course, it's a well-known fact that Jason isn't the killer in this movie. It's his mother, Mrs. Voorhees. On a narrative level, that's actually kind of lazy because that character comes out of nowhere. It's not like we have a list of suspects and then say, oh, well, it's this one and here's why, and that makes sense. Miss Voorhees just sort of shows up and has that monologue where she talks about how Jason was never very good at swimming and goes nuts. I'm not saying
wasn't she like the head of the camp counselors or something?
She was the cook. Her first appearance in the movie is when she shows up at the end to reveal herself. So I don't know.
No, I'm pretty sure she's in it earlier than that.
No, I'm pretty sure you're wrong.
I seem to remember her having one other appearance than that earlier. I mean, it was just like a glimpse, like she might have asked somebody something and then stepped off screen, but I'm pretty sure that she had one appearance before that.
Either way, it's still kind of lazy screenwriting. Who's going to criticize the Friday the 13th films for their screenwriting? We're not really in it for the story.
We're in it for the tits and gore.
Yeah, and what about the nudity? And this first movie only has a little bit of nudity after Kevin Bacon and his girlfriend have a love scene and she rolls over and we see a brief flash of her nipple. And there's the strip Monopoly scene. Which is initiated by our final girls. The final girl cliche of them being virginal and pure really didn't come along till a little bit later. Any thoughts on the nudity in this movie?
I honestly don't remember that much about it.
The franchise would really be turned into a more solid gore and tits delivery machine a couple films from now. Now, that ending. Now, the ending, it wasn't even in the original screenplay. The whole thing about Jason jumping out of the lake and dragging her under. Basically, I think one of the people who made the movie saw Carrie and said, we should do that in our film. Accidentally ended up creating the central character for the rest of the series. But there's a lot of debate about what that ending actually means to the mythology. Now, what do you think that ending means? Was it just a nightmare our final girl had, or is Jason's spirit somehow communicating with her from the bottom of the lake or whatever?
I don't know. I mean, that's a tough question.
Never really put that much thought into it.
Never put that much thought into it. I just thought it was, the last scare of the movie. Mm-hmm. I think you can tell, though, that they weren't planning on putting that part in the movie at first, because when you watch the second one, he's the first kill of the second movie.
Yeah.
Either it's one really huge continuity issue, or...
We're going to discuss what exactly Jason is very shortly. This movie was made for $550,000, which is nothing. That is mincemeat today. And it grossed $39 million.
So in other words, it made bank.
Oh yeah, it was a huge hit. This movie opened on Friday the 13th back in 1980, same day as The Shining, and outgrossed it. So this one was a huge hit. So immediately, somebody said, sequel. Now, the writer and creator of the story and the Jason character just kind of fumbled around in the dark and said, well, why don't we make the killer Jason? And they ran with it, and of course, 20 years later, that character is famous. Friday the 13th, Part 2. 1981, directed by Steve Miner. In this film, our very first Jason is actually played by two different actors. He's played by Steve Dashowitz and Warrington Gillette. Now, from what I understand, the one guy only is actually in one scene, and the stunt double did most of the work, but he wasn't credited or something. There's a book called Crystal Lake Memories, which is this huge hardback book, which goes into obsessive-compulsive detail about every little itty-bitty thing. I think they interviewed every single person that has ever had anything to do with the Friday the 13th series.
Good God.
Yeah, it's a Bible. So, what are your favorite kills in this one, JD?
Well, definitely the screwdriver in the head.
Really, the opening, the ice pick?
Ice pick. I think that's really cool. It just, that particular scene just gets you on the edge of your seat, and the next thing you know, whack!
Well, the opening sequence is fantastic. The opening scene starts with a little boy playing in a puddle outside his house, and his mother tells him to come in. And then you see Jason's feet stomp through the puddle. I'm probably overanalyzing this. In fact, I know I'm overanalyzing this. But to me, this kind of sums up the entire central plot hook of the entire series in one scene. It's the innocence of childhood, like summer camp, being violated by something malevolent and sinister.
Like Jason.
Exactly. That scene is very drawn out and long, and you get a spring-loaded cat, the first of many. The whole concept of our final girl from the first movie, still living in fear even though the events of the first one are behind her, her life is still not satisfied, and of course she opens her fridge, there's Mama's head, and bang, pickaxe in the forehead. Now, my favorite kill in this movie is probably one of the most well-known ones. It's the kid in the wheelchair who gets a face full of machete and goes down back the stairs. That's a pretty cool scene.
I really like that one.
Or how about the two lovers in bed together getting impaled simultaneously?
I think the point we're making here is that there's just a lot of cool death scenes in this movie.
Now, do you like this movie?
Yeah, I do. I like it a lot.
Really? Because I'm not really actually a fan of this one. I rewatched it not too long ago because I remember not liking it very much. Thinking it was kind of a knockoff of the first movie. And I rewatched it last Halloween and pretty much felt the exact same way. People in like the hardcore slasher fandom adore this thing. And I think that's really more nostalgic than anything else. But you really do like this film?
I do. I like it.
Okay.
It's got a lot of good jump scares in it.
There are definitely some, like I said, the opening sequence is great. The ending with Jason coming through the window is a wonderful, let's throw our popcorn out of our laps moment.
The thing of it is, if people like Diablo Cody would pay attention to these older movies like Friday the 13th Part 2, if they would just watch those, they would learn how to do a good jump scare. Nowadays, you kind of watch it, she's going to close that door, and there's going to be something standing there.
I hate it when the movies just beat you over the head with the jump scares.
There was a lot in the Friday the 13th series.
Oh, God, yes.
But they still knew how to deliver them.
I understand what you're saying. These days, if you're watching a horror movie, especially, let's say, something produced by Platinum Dunes, and the sound goes really, really quiet, you know immediately something is going to make a loud noise.
And it's usually going to be a cat and some pots and pans out in the woods. It makes no sense.
The fake-out jump scare is worse than the regular. Stop wasting our time, movie!
I know, like, they'll open the door and the music will get real loud, and you're like, oh, there's something there. And then they close the door and there's nothing. And then they turn around and it's like, boom!
Still nothing. I know, I hate it when the musical score is just obnoxious. Anyway, Friday the 13th Part 2. Now, what the hell is Jason? Is he a zombie? Is he a revivant? Has he just been hanging out in the woods for 30 years?
I would say he is evil incarnate.
It's not hard to figure out that they really didn't put a lot of thought into this movie because I always thought that Jason was a revivant, that he died as a little kid and his mother getting murdered caused him to come back. But this movie makes it pretty clear that Jason's just been hanging out in the woods for 30 years and nobody noticed, much less his mother who was right there in the camp the whole time. That really doesn't make any sense to me. Thoughts on the baghead Jason design? Because this isn't the iconic look of the character.
Well, no. I got mixed feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I understand that the baghead kind of adds like a mystery to the character that makes the viewer say, what is behind that bag? Mm-hmm. What is so horrible of that kid's face that he has to hide it? But on the other hand, it just seems like a plot device for one last jump scare at the end of the movie.
When the mask finally comes off.
They pull the mask off and like, oh my god!
And the killer's always got to have a mask of some sort, preferably one that is blank or white or something like that. Another thing they ripped off from the Italians. And speaking of rip-offs, this movie cribs a lot from other better films, like Mario Bava's Twitch the Death Nerve, the very first slasher movie ever. The kill of the two lovers in bed together getting speared at the same time, totally stolen completely from that movie. The scene of somebody getting a machete buried up to their face, again, stolen from Twitch of the Death Nerve. Even Jason with the baghead is stolen from a movie called The Town That Dreaded Sundown, where the killer has the exact same getup. The movie pulls a lot from other films, which in of itself isn't a problem. I mean, I love Tarantino, so I can't criticize, but I just feel like those movies did the same thing better. The characters in this movie are pretty annoying. The prankster character especially, who vanishes midway through the film without explanation. He shows up, puts the spear down, Jason takes the spear. We never find out what happens to that dude. We don't find his body or anything. He just disappears mid-film. And most of the characters are crass, dumb, shallow, not very interesting. And even the kid in the wheelchair is a jock. There's the couple that's defined solely by their desire to bang each other. People really like the final girl in this movie. Jenny, played by Amy Steele, has a big following. And she's interesting. She's not virginal. She has a grabby boyfriend. And she really beats the shit out of Jason in that last act. That last act is just them chasing each other and fighting.
I'm one of the ones that really like that character.
She's fine, I guess. She's no Jamie Lee. There are a number of neat moments, though, when you see a scene of Jason dragging a body down the stairs and you just see the feet going down the steps. That's kind of cool. Or when the girl pulls back the bed covers and there's blood and Jason gets up and has the knife and we do that close zoom in on her face. I'm not saying the film is without merit. I don't know, I've never warmed to this one as much as a lot of the other slasher fans have. Friday the 13th Part 2 was made for $1.0 million. So considerable step up from the budget of the first.
It's almost doubled.
And it grossed $21 million. Considerable profit there. That's $20 million of profit. These movies are still making lots of people money at this point. Which brings us to Friday the 13th, Part 3, the next year. 1982, also directed by Steve Miner, same director. Jason is played in this film by Richard Brooker, a British actor. Of course, this film is famous for a couple of reasons. It's in 3D, first off, which is awesome. It's the first time Jason gets his hockey mask, gone on to completely define the character.
Yeah, even when people make fun of him in cartoons.
It's just become one of those iconic images in pop culture. I feel this movie is really the first one that works.
Before we go any further,
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
What the fuck was a hockey mask doing at a campground?
Well, you know...
Well, you don't have an answer for that.
I don't have an answer for that one. Shelley, the prankster, has the mask on to scare the one girl. And beyond that, we never get any more explanation. Do you need more of an explanation than that?
I'm just curious.
Yeah, they don't sell hockey masks like that anymore, so where the hell does Jason keep getting them?
He probably has some major special effects company fabricating him one out of silicone.
This is the first time Jason is really intimidating for me, because they get a big actor to play him for the first time. In the second movie, he was kind of a tall, skinny guy, and in this one, he's a big, beefy dude. Apparently, in the night between this film and the previous film, Jason spent that whole night eating raw chickens and dead weighting. I don't know if you know this, but Stan Winston did Jason's makeup in this one, so...
I did know that.
Yeah. The movie works for me because it's the first time the film is built around the gore. There's no Scooby-Doo mystery. There's no question of who the killer is. We know it's Jason right from the beginning. There's no doubt about that. And the movie's really kind of about introducing characters and then having him knock them off. This is the first one to really have the 80s campy tone. Because there's so much goofy shit in this movie. The yo-yo going towards the camera and the group of bikers that show up.
And the guy hanging at a pole or something, pole comes right at you.
Yes, the 3D is incredible.
I think Jason even spears somebody in 3D, don't he?
Oh yeah, the spear gun. In fact, the kills in this movie. Okay, favorite kill in this one.
I like the bow and arrow kill.
The spear gun?
Yeah, it might have been spear gun. Where the guy's running.
It's a girl.
The one I'm talking about is a guy. Right when he first dons the hockey mask. I thought he used a bow and arrow to kill somebody. They were running down the pier or something.
The beach.
And then he bow and arrows them in the back and they just fall dead.
No, actually, it's much worse than that. The girl is running down the beach. Jason stands on the pier, points the spear gun directly at the audience, and it goes right into her eye. It's kind of horrifying.
Sorry, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie.
Honestly, there are a lot of really good kills in this one. I love the guy walking on his hands.
Yeah, and it's...
Boom! Yeah, that's incredible. Or the dude getting his head crushed at the end and the eyeball shooting out towards the audience. So much good stuff in this one. This is one of my favorites.
They really embraced the 3D part of it.
Oh yeah, the 3D is totally exploitive. Love it. The final girl in this movie, Chris, talks about in flashback a scene where she ran off into the woods earlier in her life and was assaulted by Jason. Jason attacked her. There's a question in the fandom. Did Jason rape her? Because in Crystal Lake Memories, the screenwriter flat out says, yes, Jason raped her. Most people agree, no, Jason didn't, because that's not in character for him. He's never shown any sexual desires before or since. Did Jason rape Chris?
I wouldn't think that he did, because his whole shtick is he kills teenagers because they have sex.
My interpretation of Jason has always been that he's kind of a child in his brain anyway. He always sort of sees himself as a child, being mommy's good boy and doing work for her, you know?
I know.
Did you know this movie has 3 different endings?
I didn't know that, no.
The ending that's in the movie is Chris hits Jason in the head with the axe. He goes down. And she goes out onto the lake on a boat. And
then he comes running out of the house, right?
No. The theatrical ending has the zombie of Mama Voorhees jumping out of the lake and pulling her down. And then she wakes up and it's a nightmare. There's a television ending where you see Jason running around the pier and he tries to attack her and it's a nightmare. And then there was a third ending filmed where she goes back to the house, opens the door, and there's Jason without a mask holding her boyfriend's head and Jason kills her. That was the original ending and it was nixed for being too negative or whatever. We know this exists because there are stills of it. We've never seen it. I don't know if the film survives, but we've seen pictures of it.
I didn't remember that.
This is one of my favorite of the series. And the first time Jason hides under something and stabs through it, that was a trademark of his mom in the first movie. And in this one, the girl is sitting in the hammock reading Fangoria magazine, and Jason stabs her from underneath the hammock.
My question is, a hammock is just a net?
Why didn't you notice it?
Yeah.
Don't think about it too hard. Don't try and poke logic holes in my Friday the 13th net, okay? Now, this movie was made for $2,005,000. Again, the budgets are steadily rising, and it still made $36 million. So these movies are still making a shitload of money. I think the 3D probably added to the expense, but at the same time brought more people in. Next comes my absolute favorite of the entire franchise. Friday the 13th, the final chapter, from 1984, directed by Joseph Zito. You want to talk a little bit about the timeline of this series, because it is seriously effed up. The first movie took place in 1980 when it came out, or at least 79. Part 2 is on Friday the 13th, 1984, because they talk about 4 years later of the opening. And then the next one takes place the next day, and this one takes place the day after that. So Friday the 13th, Part 4 actually takes place on Sunday the 15th, but that's not as catchy. And it gets screwier from there. We'll discuss that as it comes. Jason in this movie is played by Ted White, who's my favorite Jason because he's just mean and quiet and weird. Any thoughts on this movie, JD?
This is my second least favorite.
Oh, you are kidding! You don't like it?
I don't.
Oh, this film is incredible.
I think it's stupid.
How is the plot that different from the previous 3 films?
Because a fucking 8-year-old kid kills Jason.
He outsmarts Jason.
No, he kills Jason by shaving his head and wearing a hockey mask.
He doesn't even have the mask on, he just shaves his head.
Yeah, which is even worse.
You're wrong. This film was incredible.
Jason needed a protege. In real life, if Jason really existed, he would have killed the kid and said, "Fuck you for trying."
You know, there's a precedence for that, though, because in the second movie, the final girl tricks Jason by putting on his mother's sweater, and that seems to convince him. Jason is easily swayed by visual stimuli.
Okay, but there's a difference between portraying his mother and then pretending to be him.
Why not? Why does that cross the logic line for you?
I don't know. I don't like the storyline.
So what's your favorite kill in this movie, even though you don't like it? Because the gore in this is phenomenal.
I've actually only ever seen this movie once.
Tom Savini came back for this one. Tom Savini, of course, did the effects for the original movie and refused to do the sequels because he thought the sequels were dumb. But he decided to come back for Part 4 because he created Jason, so I figured he should kill him off too. Because this was, of course, supposed to be the last one. Mm-hmm. And there are some great kills in this movie. The movie opens with a guy getting his throat slashed with a surgical saw and then getting his head twisted around. And a guy gets stabbed in the crotch with a spear gun, and then the spear gun gets shot. A girl goes skinny dipping in the pond and is on the raft, and Jason stabs her through the raft. A guy gets stabbed in the back of the head through a movie screen. But actually, the best kill in the movie is saved for Jason himself at the very end when he gets the machete in the face. Jason survived drowning, survived getting slashed in the shoulder with a machete, survived getting hit in the head with an axe, but getting a machete, so much damage, but getting a machete lengthwise in the face, and then he falls, and it pushes up through his head, and his tongue is moving, and his eyes are bulging, and a gore-gasm. And how can you not love the characters in this movie? Fucking Crispin Glover? My all-time favorite actor, Crispin Glover, is Jimbo, who does the spaz dance. Him and his friend Teddy keep talking about how he's a dead fuck. And the twins in this movie, so much nudity in this movie.
I'll give you that. It has a lot of nudity. Yeah, I remember that.
The third movie built on the series being an exploitation franchise. This movie fulfills that to its full promise because it's gory as hell, and there are 3 or 4 gratuitous sex scenes, one of which takes place in a shower. Oh god, I forgot the kill when Jason crushes the guy's head. Come on, man. How can you not dig that shit? The best gore in the whole series. Just spectacular. I don't know, and I like the character of Tommy. I know he's played by Corey Feldman. I think he's entertaining. He's like you and me, man. He's a horror nerd. And only a horror nerd can kill Jason. Don't tell me that doesn't make sense.
He never killed him.
It's confirmed he dies at the end of this movie because in Part 6 they have to bring him back from the dead. This movie was directed by Joseph Zito, who previously directed The Prowler, which is one of the best 80s slasher movies ever. And that was a very gorgeous visual movie. Lots of deep blues and blacks. And this movie, too, is a lot more visually accomplished than perhaps some of the other franchise members. I just feel like this is the perfect mixture of camp and gore and surprising pathos at the end when Tommy is hugging the final girl and you see the look on his face and you can tell his childhood is gone. His innocence has been shattered. This is my favorite. I can't believe you don't like this movie.
Oh, I guess that means I'm doing more of these stupid podcasts.
You hurt my feelings.
All right, I take it back.
This movie was made for $2 million, grossed $32 million. Big bucks still coming in. Friday the 13th, the final chapter, made a lot of money. So I think somebody at Paramount said, maybe the chapter wasn't so final. So in 1985, the next year, we had Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, come along. This movie was directed by Danny Steinman.
I really hate this movie.
Yeah, I do as well. I was surprised when I looked this movie up. There is a small faction of people who adore this film, which my response to that is kind of like, what the fuck? This film is blatantly, objectively terrible.
WTF, noobs.
But let's go through the motions. What's your favorite kill in this one, if you have one?
When the lame-ass, not Jason killer gets killed.
The gore is actually okay. The kills are at least creative. A girl gets her eyes jabbed out with a garden harrow thingy, and then the guy gets his head crushed with a leather strap. around the tree, which is creative at the very least. I'll give the imposter Jason that much. This movie is incredibly sleazy, and there's a pretty decent amount of nudity. A girl flashes her boobs in the mirror for absolutely no reason. There's a love scene, and then the one skinny girl with the itty-bitty titties walks around her bedroom naked. I used to hate the film. Really, when I first saw it, I just hated it. It's like, there's no Jason. What is this bullshit? It's stupid. But rewatching it a couple years ago, I now merely dislike it. Because I still think it's mean-spirited and sleazy and not in a fun way. It's overly cartoonish. The characters are obnoxious. The acting is terrible. Especially the new guy playing Tommy. Of course, the story behind this one is that Tommy was thoroughly traumatized by the events in Part 4, and this picks up 5 years in the future. So the timeline is flung even further away. Of course, Tommy is played by a completely different actor because he's a teenager now. And this kid is just wooden as can be. He's really bad. And then in Crystal Lake Memories, I find out that this kid has grown up to be like a priest or something. The movie was directed by a sleazy, cokehead former pornographer, surprising absolutely no one. It feels really greasy and grimy, and the whole thing has this weird Pat Benatar music video feel to it. Is it the most 80s of all of the Friday the 13th movies?
I think the next one's a little more 80s.
It's pretty 80s, yeah, but I feel like this one, everybody's got moosed up hair, and there's a new wave girl. The premise is solid. Jason invades a half-away home for troubled kids. Makes perfect sense, because where else are you going to find kids that are going to do drugs and have sex and get killed than a half-away home for troubled teens? Makes sense, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired. There are greasers in this movie, like fucking straight out of Happy Days greasers. You know, the same thing happens in Halloween 5, too. What is with 80s slasher movies and anachronistic greasers? I wasn't alive in 1985, but I'm pretty sure there weren't kids with moosed up hair on leather jackets on motorcycles talking like Fonzie. I don't think it existed back then.
Maybe.
It strikes me as odd. There's a little kid in this movie, a little black kid named Reggie, who gratuitously fills the role that Tommy filled in the last movie because he makes masks and he drops spiders on people. He lives somehow. The main thing that I think people really dislike about this movie is the fact that it's not Jason. The movie tricks you into thinking it's Jason, but it's not. It's some guy who, for reasons that aren't really explained well, dresses up as Jason. What are your thoughts on that, JD?
I think it's fucking stupid.
We don't demand a lot from these movies. I pretty much demand 4 things. Gore, nudity, some decent 80s camp summer atmosphere, and Jason being a badass. Now, this movie technically delivers on 2 of those things, but Jason not being a badass and not even being in the movie, I feel like if the movie had been honest and said the killer isn't Jason, it's somebody else, it would have been less poorly received. The fact that it tricks you into thinking it's Jason, it sticks in your teeth. The characters are really, really bad. The annoying woman on the motorcycle and her retarded son, they're so broad and they're so aggravating. I know the characters are often annoying and you want to see them die, but if characters are so annoying, it makes the film unpleasant to watch. It's sort of self-defeating. However, having said all of that, this movie was still successful. It was made for $2 million. It grossed $21 million. That's still $19 million worth of profit there. Paramount produced these first 8 films, and they were huge moneymakers for them, but Paramount has always kind of treated them as the unwanted stepchild of the Paramount family. At this point, they had the attitude, like, we can crap out whatever the fuck we want and people will still go see it. But the general response was still negative, so somebody finally said, all right, I guess we can't crap out whatever we want. And in 1986, we got Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, alternatively known as Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6. The film was directed by Tom McLaughlin, and Jason is played by C.J. Graham. This film is a favorite for a lot of the people in the fandom. What do you think, JD?
This is probably my favorite Friday the 13th film.
It's a good one. I would rank it pretty highly. Now, first off, what's your favorite kill?
Oh, it has to be when the sheriff gets it. Bent backwards.
That's pretty cool. There are a lot of fun gore moments, like the triple decapitation, which is just so ridiculous and over the top. It's like somebody looked at a double decapitation and said, yeah, we can do one more. Or Jason drops out of the trees, grabs the guy, and throws him into the tree, face smashed into the little smiley face somebody carved.
Yeah.
And then Jason looks down and he's holding the guy's arm, and even Jason's response is like, whoa, I didn't know I could do that. He twists the girl's head around all the way, and there's that scene where he goes into the cabin and kills the girl and like throws her through the window, and then later they go into the cabin and the walls are covered with blood. He's tearing shit up in this movie. It
permanently imprints a girl's face in the camper.
Yes, that's probably my favorite kill, truth be told. From a writing and visual perspective, this is one of the most accomplished Friday the 13th movies. Basically says fuck it and makes Jason a zombie. It says this series is already ridiculous and unbelievable. How has this character survived all this insane damage to his body? Fuck it, he's a zombie now. bring him back like goddamn Frankenstein with a fucking lightning bolt. The movie stops just short of giving Jason electrical superpowers.
I don't know. When he first awakens there,
But basically, it opens up new avenues for the series. These films basically have all the same premise. Teens gather in an isolated location to party, get killed by Jason. And by making Jason a superpowered mega zombie, it opens up new avenues for the series to do pretty much whatever the hell it wants, which it would proceed to in the future films. There's a lot of humor in this movie.
oh no, there's a lot of humor in this movie.
One of the first things he does, he kills Horseshack. First off, Horseshack from Welcome Back, Kotter. He's the first kill in this movie. The guy's driving a Volkswagen Beetle. He gets speared for the face with a fence post, and the woman goes out and runs and falls in a puddle, and Jason appears over her and stabs her, and then the camera focuses on the American Express card floating in the puddle, demanding the audience to yell, "Don't leave home without it!" The crazy guy who warns everybody, the old drunk janitor, looks at the camera and says, "Some people have a sick idea of entertainment." Pretty...
There's a lot of comic awareness.
Yeah, it's very meta. It was Scream before Scream. And honestly, I feel like the humor is pushed maybe a little too far. It's a little too winking and in your face with it. But when the movie's this much fun, you really can't complain too much. And there's some awesome stuff in this movie. The RV sequence.
Oh, yeah.
The girl is in the bathroom. Well, first off, they were fucking. And Jason...
To music.
They were fucking to music. And Jason pulls the power line and somehow sneaks into the RV when neither of them are looking. Dumbass guy is driving the RV down the street and he's got Alice Cooper launched all the way up. So he can't hear his girlfriend being murdered in the back of the RV. You know, Jason pushes her face through the wall and then sneaks up on the guy and stabs him in the temple with a knife. The RV crashes, gets set on fire, rolls across the road, and Jason steps out on top of it, arms up going, "I'm motherfucking Jason Voorhees!"
Yeah, Batman still take him out. Well, that's because he's Batman.
He's Batman. And I love the scene where Jason goes into the cabin full of little kids. Because this is the first time Camp Crystal Lake actually has kids in it. All throughout the other 5 movies, we never actually got to see the camp full of little kids. And so they're all in their beds, and Jason sneaks into the cabin, and you're kind of wondering, is he going to do it? Is he going to cross that line and go after kids? He's a completely remorseless sociopath. He kills indiscriminately, so you're thinking it could happen, right?
Right.
And he looks down at the little girl, and she looks up at him, and she's clearly pissing her pants in terror. And then he just leaves. Jason was trolling those kids.
Dude, trolling.
Jason, the original troll. And Jason's even got a fucking utility belt. The characters actually are kind of developed beyond just a single stereotype. You have the sheriff's daughter that's kind of helping Tommy out, and she's kind of spunky and interesting. And Tommy is sort of a fun character, you know?
The
And
chase scene in that movie is really good, too.
yeah, and I love the scene where they're in her car and she has him like pushed down into her crotch for some reason. I don't remember the context why. I just remember the scene.
Because they ran into a roadblock.
Right.
And she didn't want people to see him with her.
I love that they get the cops involved, because the previous movies took place in a vacuum. It all happens overnight. The cops don't have time to get involved. But the cops get involved here. They know who Jason is. They're aware.
Sheriff gets bent over backwards.
Yeah. The film is very aware and very knowledgeable. That makes it pretty entertaining. What do you think of the ending, the way Jason is disposed?
The only thing I don't like about the movie, too,
Expound on that.
I think it's lazy. We've hung him, we've smashed his head in with an axe and a machete and all this other bullshit, so let's try drowning him again. Because clearly that worked the first time.
Actually, you know, I like that because it's sort of mythic. Let's take Jason back to the place where he was born. You can't kill him because obviously he can't die, especially now that he's a super zombie. So let's just try and chain him up and hold him in a pit somewhere, deep in secret. I like that. It's mythic. It's interesting. This movie is one of the most expensive in the franchise at $3 million. And it only grossed $19 million. That's a step down because I think people were either a little worn out of the franchise in general. I mean, this is a part 6. It's been going on for a while. Or maybe the last movie kind of burned them and they were uncertain. But this film certainly has its fans now. It's one of my favorites. Now, the next movie in the series is my favorite. 1988's Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Directed by John Carl Blucher, a special effects guy with a number of notable credits. And there's really an important thing about this movie. It's the first time Jason is played by Kane Hodder. Obviously, a different actor had played Jason all throughout the previous movies, but Kane Hodder would play him several times, and he's become really heavily associated with the character, which some people think is a good thing and some people think is a bad thing. There's mixed opinions there about whether Kane Hodder did good for the franchise or not. What do you think, JD?
I think he did.
I think he did a good thing by like going on the Arsenio Hall show in character. And he was the first actor who seemed to love the character and enjoy playing Jason.
You can definitely tell the difference, too. I mean,
Oh, yeah. What are your favorite kills in Part 7?
I guess maybe actually the little girl kills her daddy
At the beginning of the movie?
at the beginning of
It's
the
a
movie.
psychic thing, isn't it?
Yes, it's a psychic thing. She shatters the bridge and
The pier.
her dad dies, and at the same time she kind of unleashes Jason.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And when she's a little girl at the time that she unleashes Jason,
Well, no, she doesn't unleash unleash him. He's down there at the lake.
But if you remember correctly, he's got the rock and the chain. This is the point I'm making.
Yeah. Massive continuity error here.
Yeah.
The last movie took place, I think, once you did up the map, actually took place in like 1990. This movie opens with the family at the park, and the little girl Tina is psychic, because this movie is basically Jason versus Carrie. It was originally supposed to be Freddy versus Jason, but there was an issue there. The companies couldn't come to an agreement, so it became Jason versus Carrie. So the little girl kills her father, and Jason's down there at the lake, yeah. And then it says 10 years later. Now, does this movie really take place in the year 2000? Are we to believe this? I don't. Either Crystal Lake is a magical time vortex, or it's just a continuity error, and we should just accept it and not get bent about it. This movie was heavily cut by the MPAA. At this point, there was the moral backlash, and the MPAA was coming down hard on slasher. Which is a shame, because if you watch the DVD and the uncut kills, the gore in this movie is fantastic. Jason grabs a guy's head and crushes it down to the size of a walnut, and a fountain of blood erupts from the guy's mouth. There's that cliche in pop culture of Jason using a chainsaw for some reason. I don't know why. Because he never does. A chainsaw is used against him in Part 5. And in this movie, he has a tree limb cutting saw, which is very similar, but not exactly the same thing. Guts a guy with that, which again, you totally cut in the rated version, but in the uncut version, you see all the intestines getting pulled out. It's pretty gnarly stuff. I was reading about this in Crystal Lake Memories, and the level of executive meddling was apparently pretty high in this movie. Apparently there was supposed to be a housing development getting attacked, and a helicopter sequence. The screenwriter is interviewed in Crystal Lake Memories, and he is hilariously bitchy. The whole time he's like, I think the film's a piece of shit, and I don't know why they fucked with it, and I'm really not happy with the movie, and they kept telling me to change things and then change it back, and it's just hilarious. A bitter screenwriter, there's nothing funnier. What thoughts do you have on this movie, JD?
I like it.
It's a pretty fun one. I like this one a lot.
Girl fucking hangs Jason with an electric cord that she pulls psychically out of the ceiling.
Sets him on fire, blows the house up. If the last movie said, okay, these are the things we can do, this movie said, okay, let's do some of these things. It really takes it even further over the top and out of any level of resemblance to reality, but who cares, because it's a blast. There's actually an interesting dynamic here. You have Tina, who is mentally scarred by her psychic powers, and her mother, who's very concerned, and her asshole doctor, who is trying to take advantage of her. And of course, there's a group of partying teens at the lake, and there are two nerds in this movie. There's a male nerd and a female nerd, and I like both of those characters a lot.
Do they hook up together?
Actually, they don't hook up, no. The female nerd does a makeover on herself and gives herself makeup and a fancy haircut and makes herself pretty, and then immediately gets killed by Jason. She gets a scythe in the throat. The male nerd is trying to hook up with the bitch character all throughout the movie, and he says things like, looks like I've got a date with a soap on a rope, and he writes science fiction. He gets killed. Somebody finds his head in a flower pot. Neither of the nerds make it out of this movie, so there goes your theory about only virgins surviving, because I'm pretty sure both of those characters were virginal. And that bitch character, the queen bitch character, is so annoying. And in the uncut version, she gets an axe to the face, but in the uncut version, you see her entire face like split in two, which is great because you just hate that character so much, and it's so much fun watching her getting executed finally. You know, Kane Hodder is not actually too tall of a guy. He's 6 foot something. But in this movie, he looks enormous because he's shot from a low angle the entire time, so he just appears to tower over everybody. And the makeup for Jason in this movie is great.
Great.
It's great! It's great! We have fun on the show, people. Have the skull coming through, and you can see his bones, and I have a 18-inch action figure of Jason based off the design from this film that really just gives you a good look at all the detail that went into the design of the character here, which none of the films subsequently followed up on. So the point I'm making is it's really well shot. Throughout the film, the character of Tina is having psychic flashes, like predictions of Jason doing things. There's one scene where they're driving down the road, and she has a flash of Jason killing her mom, which naturally comes to pass, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Fucking A.
Jason gets really creative in this one. He has some sort of weird garden trimming axe thing. That's what he kills the mom with, and the tree trimming saw, and he kills somebody with a party horn. Obviously, he's had a lot of time to think of new ways to slaughter people, being at the bottom of a lake for 10 years. And of course, yeah, that last act where Tina goes crazy and finally gives it to Jason is... It's so refreshing to see a character that can finally go toe-to-toe to him, after him being an unstoppable juggernaut for the course of 6 films. Technically 4. Yeah, that last act when she's throwing the lamp into Jason's face and knocking him down the stairs and making his mask squeeze so tight around his head that pus starts to leak out and sets him on fire and electrocutes him and drops a porch on him. Blows the house up. Insane. And he survives all of it, of course, because he's Jason.
Yeah, how does he die in that one?
Tina summons her father's body up from the bottom of the lake, and some sort of magical voodoo happens, and he pulls Jason down into the lake with him. And it looks kind of silly because the guy comes out of the lake completely healthy. You can't tell he's been dead or anything. Apparently, originally, the plan was to have the dad be a corpse, but again, there was some executive meddling. So it looks a little silly now, but I think this adds to the wonderfully campy atmosphere of this movie. I enjoy this film a lot. It's definitely second favorite.
I was going to say, what about 4?
4 and 7 are my favorites, followed by part 6 and 3. And the movie was made for $2 million, almost 3, and grossed $19 million. It's staying consistent. They're still making money, but I think you can tell that the audience is getting a little tired of the adventures of Jason. The fact that the next movie was the last one produced by Paramount, I think maybe shows that if the audience wasn't getting sick of them, the people producing the films definitely were. From 1989, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, directed by Rob Hayden. Kane Hodder returns as Jason. Any thoughts on this one, JD?
It has some cool stuff in it.
Really?
Well, I like the fact that guy gets harpooned. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The whole chase scene at the end of the movie, I really like.
The chase through New York, once they actually get to New York.
Yeah.
That's a common criticism against this movie. Jason is only in New York for the last maybe half hour. It's not really so much Jason Takes Manhattan as Jason takes a boat. Because apparently Crystal Lake has an estuary going out into the New York harbor now, somehow. You have a favorite kill in this movie? Is it the harpoon?
It's the harpoon, yeah.
My favorite kill in the movie is when the boxer is beating up Jason and does his best and finally says, "Hit me with your best shot," and Jason knocks his block off and the head falls into a dumpster.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, too.
The last two movies were kind of leaning towards the comedic side of things. And this movie can't decide if it's trying to be comedic or trying to be scary. And of course, originally the movie was going to take place much more in New York. There was going to be a scene of Jason on the George Washington Bridge and at the Empire State Building. All of these things have to be cut for budgetary reasons. I think the scene in Times Square was the only scene actually shot in New York. I think the rest of it was shot in Canada. It's an even bigger lie. Only one scene takes place in New York. Though that is a cool scene, Jason standing in the middle of Times Square and the camera spinning around him. But then he kicks the kid's radio and shows his face to them, and that scares them, and that doesn't make any sense with the character. It's definitely one of the cheapest looking films in the series for me.
Yeah.
The blood is really fake.
Yeah, it is.
It's really bright and clear. There are some weird MPAA cuts in this. There's a scene where somebody gets their throat slashed and no blood comes out. They just die magically.
Okay.
And there's a scene early on where Jason stabs a guy with a harpoon gun and pulls what I assume is supposed to be his intestines out, but it just looks like yellow plumbing tubing.
We've discussed that, Zach.
It's not. You're wrong. It's not something from the bow. It's supposed to be the dude's intestine. You're wrong.
No, I have to say you're wrong here, because right before he sticks the gun in there, you see the yellow tubes on the harpoon.
I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong.
No, I think you're wrong.
I think you're wrong.
Well, we'll have to watch it after this pitch, just so I can prove you wrong.
Just that one scene. And the Jason makeup, you see it at the end, it's terrible looking. It looks nothing like the makeup from the last movie. Now Jason, instead of wearing tattered work clothes, is wearing a Michael Myers jumpsuit for some reason. And the way he's resurrected in this movie is ridiculous, as if the other resurrections were so believable. But apparently there are electrical wires at the bottom of Crystal Lake for some reason.
Well, electricity. It's always electricity.
The characters are pretty broad and stereotypical. Final Girl is really flat and uninteresting. She keeps having these psychic flashes of Jason because her asshole stepdad threw her in the lake when she was a little kid. The little kid Jason looks nothing like the Jason in the first movie, and those scenes are really broad and annoying, and there's the Joan Jett punk rock girl who doesn't make it far. There's the annoying principal character. The characters in this movie are really broad and uninteresting. Jason teleports all throughout this movie, and it's really annoying. The movie takes it way too far. They're being chased by Jason, they run into a building, and then Jason throws them out the window of the building. Somebody is running from Jason up a mast on the boat. The guy looks down, and Jason is at the bottom of the mast. Then he looks up, and Jason is at the top of the mast. What the fuck is going on?
Teleportation.
He has magical teleportation powers suddenly. Notice how I said that Kane Hodder looked huge in the last movie because of the way he was shot. In this movie, he looks tiny.
Because it was shot from a high view.
He just looks minuscule. It shows some of Kane Hodder's weaknesses as an actor. He has a very famous quote where he says, Jason doesn't kill dogs. Because he was going to kill the dog in this movie, and Kane Hodder said, Jason doesn't kill dogs, and they let it go. But in the second movie, Jason totally kills a dog. A dog runs up to him, and then later you see the dog's half-eaten, desecrated corpse. He totally fucking killed that dog. And what the hell, Kane Hodder? Do your research.
I think he was trying to say he wasn't portrayed as killing.
Perhaps. The ending of this movie is really stupid. Do you remember the ending of this film, JD?
I don't remember much more after the chase scene.
Jason has chased our two remaining characters into the sewers of New York. And apparently, every night, the sewers of New York are flushed out with toxic waste. Of course, Jason gets caught in the toxic waste, and this kills him somehow. And he erodes from the acid and turns into a little boy again. I think he even waves goodbye to the final girl or something. Now I suppose it's possible that this is her psychic connection or whatever. She's been having these flashes all throughout the film. So that's possible, but at the same time it's kind of that's retarded. Why would Jason melt into a little kid? The film has its heart in the right place, but I really just think there was a deficiency of talent involved in the people who made it. If you listen to the director's commentary on the DVD, the guy sounds like he's a fan. He seems to be enthusiastic about the material, but it's the second weakest film in the series. Really, you dislike this film more than Part 5?
No.
Would you say it's the weakest film that actually has Jason in it?
Yes.
Okay. Weaker than the next one?
I really liked the next.
Takes Manhattan, cost $5 million, so the most expensive film to date. And it only grossed $14 million. Now, that is a major drop from the previous films. To the point where Paramount said, fuck it, we don't care about your Friday the 13th anymore, and sold the film to another franchise. Sold it to New Line Pictures. And, of course, I believe that New Line bought the rights to the Friday the 13th series strictly so they could make Freddy vs. Jason. Don't you think so?
Yeah.
The film they ended up making in 1993, so long break. If these films are coming out annually, and we have a 4-year break here. 1993's Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. Directed by Adam Marcus, Kane Hodder once again returns as Jason. Not that it ends up mattering. Now, before we go on to that, what's your favorite kill in this movie? Because there's some great gore in this movie. I'll give it that.
It has to be the jackass, the boyfriend of the final girl.
Okay.
The fact that he gets turned into Jason, but he just goes through so much shit. He gets a shotgun shoved through his stomach.
He gets set on fire.
He gets set on fire. Gets run over.
I think finally he melts. I remember somebody melting in this movie.
That was the cop that got possessed.
Oh, right. The best kill in the movie is near the beginning when the couples are fucking in the tent. And they're really fucking. This is the most graphic sex scene in the entire series. At least until the remake, anyway. And the girl gets stabbed through the back, out through the chest with a tent post. Then the person that Jason is currently possessing lifts upwards and splits her down the middle. And it is insanely gory. Whoa, I think you guys crossed a line there. I love the opening scene where Naked Girl goes into Camp Crystal Lake. By the way, no explanation for how Jason got back to New Jersey. And are we to presume that Crystal Lake is in New Jersey? That's the general assumption, that it's in New Jersey. That's how they can get to Manhattan in the last film. But do you think it's really meant to be New Jersey?
No.
Where do you think Crystal Lake is, JD?
Don't they, tell you a location at some point in time?
They've never actually flat out said where it is. The first movie was shot in Ohio, and you can see Ohio plates on the cars. But a lot of people, because of the 8th film, have said that the series takes place in New Jersey, right across the river from Manhattan. Either way, somehow Jason got out of the sewers and back to Camp Crystal Lake. Don't strain your brain thinking about it. And a girl goes into the cabin and she's showering and she gets naked as if to lure him out. And there's a big chase, and you find out that this girl is an FBI agent. And this whole thing is a government ambush, and Jason gets blown to shit with a bunch of machine guns and bombs and crap. Literally blown to pieces. When I first saw the movie, it's okay, where the hell do we go from there? That seems like kind of a final death for this character. No one could survive that, right?
Wrong, Zach.
And this is when the movie gets screwy, because the coroner eats Jason's magical heart, is possessed by his spirit, and suddenly Jason is no longer just a guy in a hockey mask that kills people. Suddenly he is a demon that can possess people and is trying to be resurrected through his own bloodline, and I don't really know. They really tried to forge a mythology out of nothing.
There's a magical dagger.
Yeah, there's a magical dagger, and the Necronomicon is in the Voorhees family basement. That's one thing I do like about this movie. It has a bunch of horror in jokes. At the Voorhees family home, which apparently exists, there's the Necronomicon from Evil Dead, there's the crate from Creepshow, and then there's the playground playset from The Birds. Apparently, all horror is centered in New Jersey, but I could have told you that.
Oh, am I supposed to laugh?
Good. Would you say that the film just strays too much from the central ideas of the franchise?
I'll give you that, but I still think it's a fun film. I enjoy watching it.
I understand. You have 8 movies of almost the exact same events happening. I can understand people wanting to mix it up, but I think it plays up our expectations too much. Mainly because there isn't enough Jason. He shows up at the beginning and he shows up at the end, and that's it. And a Friday the 13th movie without Jason is like a James Bond movie without James Bond. It might still be entertaining, but it's missing the main reason why you're there. What do you think of the makeup on Jason in this movie?
Awful.
It's terrible. Jason's mask is silver and melted into his face. and he looks kind of brownish and like a big worm. Not very good at all. And his outfit changes again. Maybe in between the last movie and this movie, he had time to buy some new clothes.
Maybe.
And there's some weird shit in this movie beyond the fact that Jason is possessing people. The first person Jason possesses, the big black coroner, kidnaps an old homeless guy and shaves him.
He wasn't homeless.
It was an old dude with a beard, and Jason shaves him.
Because he didn't want to have facial hair.
There's a scene of somebody melting. There's a crazy bounty hunter character named Creighton Duke, who is really, really annoying.
He's played by a famous guy, though, isn't he?
Played by Stephen Williams. I don't know who that is.
He just looks really familiar.
Yeah, he looks like Lou Gossett Jr.
That might be why.
But it's not Lou Gossett Jr. If it was Lou Gossett Jr., I would like this movie more. Because I love me some Lou Gossett Jr.
Anyhow.
There's people who work in this diner, and they have little Jason hamburgers, which, by the way, I would totally buy.
I mean, who wouldn't?
It's the owner of the restaurant and then the old guy played by Leslie Jordan are lovers, and they're like making out, and it's really weird and gross, and they're really annoying. And the lead guy, Steven, who kind of becomes the final girl's love interest, and he's sort of a nerd, but he somehow becomes the hero of the movie. At one point, he's jumping out of his handcuffs and blowing people away with a gun out of nowhere. He's annoying, too. The characters in the film aren't very good. Complaining about the characters in a Friday the 13th movie, does that make me retarded?
No.
I'm detecting a hint of sarcasm.
A hint?
There's the whole thing about Jason having to be reborn for his own bloodline, and Aaron Gray, one of the few famous people in the movie, Aaron Gray from Buck Rogers, gets violated by a snake. Jason turns into a snake and crawls up her skirt, which is kind of a weird, gross thing to happen. Jason gets stabbed with a magic knife, and demons drag him down to hell.
And then Freddy's claw comes up out of the ground and drags his mask down.
Which is the only reason anybody really talks about this movie. For us horror nerds growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, Freddy vs. Jason was a holy grail movie. Because they kept talking about making it. At the end of this movie seems to suggest that they're gonna make it, but it still took a long time to get made. That ending where Freddy's claw grabs the mask and pulls it down, that is the whole reason the film was created. And I don't know why they felt the need to go off on this crazy, unrelated tangent. Would you agree that this is the oddest film in the series?
I think the next one's a little bit more... a little bit more odd or odder.
Movie was made for $3 million, grossed $15 million, still some profit, not a lot. Early 90s, the slasher craze had died down, and people were kind of sick of the series. So there was a long hiatus. Pretty much the rest of the 90s, it was done. For a long time, we didn't know if there was going to be another movie. And then finally, in 2001, a new film came out. Jason X, otherwise known as Jason in Space. Directed by James Isaac, Kane Hodder's back. Any general thoughts on this one, JD?
It is so awful, but it is like so bad it's good awful.
It's incredibly retarded. In Crystal Lake Memories, the screenwriters say they originally pitched Jason in the Snow, which is a movie I personally have been waiting forever to see. The reason we haven't gotten Jason in the Snow yet is because Sean S. Cunningham and the other people who are responsible for the franchise don't like the idea. They're not interested in Jason in the Snow. So as a joke, the screenwriter said, well, I don't know, let's shoot him into outer space. And the people who owned the Friday the 13th franchise loved it. Consequently, Jason X was born. What are your favorite kills in this one?
Oh, man, there's a lot.
I think this might have the highest body count, especially since Jason destroys a fucking space station in this one.
There is the part where he pokes a hole in the spaceship, and
okay.
And this girl is like hanging on for her life, and she goes, this really sucks.
Yeah.
And then gets sucked out that little tiny hole.
A very popular kill in this movie is the very first one. Well, the first one in the future anyway, where Jason grabs the lady's head, dips it in the cryogenic fluid, and smashes her head.
Well, that's pretty cool, too.
I know one Jason fan site actually voted that their favorite kill in the entire series. I wouldn't go that far. It's good, but it's not even my favorite kill in this movie. My favorite kill is the VR teenagers in the sleeping bags getting bashed into each other, going, ow, the whole time.
We love premarital
We
sex.
love premarital sex.
Want to smoke some pot?
There's a lot of nudity in this movie. Two characters have a fairly graphic love scene. There's a weird scene where the professor character is in a dress getting his nipple squeezed by one of the girls. That was weird. The android has her nipple fall off. We kind of throw that quote around a lot, don't we? Completely out of context. The line about loving premarital sex.
Oh, yeah.
You're weird if you're not friends with us. Yeah, like I said, the movie is really, really stupid. It has a lot of fun with the whole concept of putting Jason in a different environment and giving him all sorts of weird weird future technology to kill people with. There's a giant screw in the middle of the floor for absolutely no reason.
Other than for him to kill somebody.
Yeah. People get hanged off of anchors. He gets a cool high-tech future machete. People are sucked out of air vents. Spaceships are blown up. I like the hilarious holodeck scene, because that makes so much sense. Let's put Jason on a holodeck. And Uber Jason, which is the movie's epitome of stupid awesome. What are your thoughts on Uber Jason, JD?
I love Uber Jason.
If you're going to put Jason in space in the future, of course he's going to become a cyborg. I mean, duh. Some of the humor is really over the top, like this sucks or he's screwed. I feel like sometimes it maybe just goes a little too far. The CGI in this movie, have you seen it recently?
No.
Oh, the CGI has not aged well. It looks terrible.
I figured it.
There are a couple of cool ones. Probably the highlight of the movie for me is when Jason gets his ass kicked completely by this badass cyborg character, to the point where he even gets his head blown off with some sort of giant, ridiculous Halo gun. It's incredibly goofy, but it's pretty funny. I like Jason X, don't you?
Yeah. I have an appreciation for the film.
That's a good way of putting it. I have an appreciation. It's not good. If you've come this far in the Friday the 13th franchise, why the hell not? The movie was made for $14 million, so lots of money. Grossed $16 million.
Ouch.
Yeah, not a big profit there. And yet, somehow, I remember reading that the fate of Freddy vs. Jason depended on Jason X making money. And apparently it made enough for them to say, let's do it. So in 2003, Freddy vs. Jason finally happened. The movie was directed by Ronnie Yu, who had previously resurrected the Child's Play franchise with Bride of Chucky. There was a lot of hoopla because Kane Hodder wasn't playing Jason. A lot of people were pissed off about this, including Kane Hodder, who was apparently promised the role by the executives, but the director wanted to go in a different direction with the character and hired Ken Krasinger instead, who was a stuntman on Part 8 and actually played the werewolf in Bad Moon, just for an example of something he's done. Thoughts on Freddy vs. Jason, JD?
I really like this film.
I maintain that this is the best Freddy vs. Jason movie we could have conceivably gotten. Now, your favorite kill in the movie? Because there are a lot.
I don't know, man. There's the one where he possesses the stoner and
yes,
like the stoner gets
the Freddy
cut in like 3 pieces.
Mm-hmm. Jay gets cut in half.
The part in the beginning when Jason stabs the guy through the back like 30 times.
That's a good one.
And then folds the bed in half
yeah.
as if he wasn't dead enough.
Yes, that's a good one. That might be my favorite.
There's the got your nose part, although that wasn't really a
not
death,
a kill,
but
nightmare sequence. I love the flaming machete to the throat. But I think the best kill in the movie is Freddy getting killed at the end, getting impaled
fuck you.
with his own arm.
Die. He didn't die. Fuck you.
There's a lot of nudity in this movie. You know, Catherine Isabella from Ginger Snaps is in it. It's not her naked. It's a body double. It's great to know that the franchise has been updated for 2003 because all the girls have breast implants. Welcome to the future. Combining Freddy vs. Jason, it's been a thought people have been talking about for years because those characters seem to go together for some reason. They have the same target audience. I think it was actually kind of a lot harder than people realize, fusing the dream world aspect of Freddy with the more, I hate to use this word, but realistic world of Jason. The movie was in development for 10 years. And some of the ideas thrown around were terrible. There was one script where Freddy was real, but Jason was a fictional character. And the fight was going to be between the real Freddy and the real life, quote unquote, real life serial killer that inspired the movie version of Jason. And it was going to be a weird legal drama. There was concept of the Fred Heads, a cult of Freddy Krueger worshippers, which was something that was in the movie for a long time before finally getting removed in the last draft, which sounds like it could have been an interesting idea, but the movie was kind of loaded already. One of the things I hated that they talked about doing was Freddy worked as a camp counselor at Crystal Lake and molested Jason and drowned him, and that's why the characters hate each other. Do you think that's a terrible idea, JD?
That's an awful fucking idea.
Because it completely fucks up the mythology of both movies. Yeah, I hate that. What the hell is Freddy doing in New Jersey anyway?
Every town has an Elm Street.
Oi, I think this movie, flaws and all, is the best Freddy vs. Jason film we were going to get. I maintain that to be true.
No. I think we need to have the Matrix guys. We got Freddy vs. Jason.
Wachowski brothers direct a big budget, them in the trench coats and bullet time.
Well, I mean, if they used Uber Freddy, there's a reason to have the trench coat.
The movie should have been a franchise. It was made for $30 million, but it made $114 million, so it was a huge hit. There were talks of doing a sequel. They wanted to bring in Ash from the Evil Dead films, which seemed like a cool idea at the time, though that script got produced as a comic book, and the comic book was terrible. So I'm glad the movie didn't get made. Robert Englund wanted to bring in Michael Myers, and as much as I wanted to see a third character, why didn't they just do a rematch? I would have watched a Freddy vs. Jason round 2.
Me, honestly, I would rather see Pinhead turned into the Matrix.
The movie is directed by Ronnie Yu, who had his roots in Hong Kong action cinema. And the movie has a really colorful, interesting, atmospheric direction to it. There's a lot of interesting color. The scenes in Freddy's boiler room are really cool. There's lots of deep blues and shadows. And the fight scene at the end is awesome. Freddy doing kung fu, Freddy fu, jumping around, giving flying knees to the face.
He go to work with that claw now.
I really feel like the idea that Freddy, he cannot materialize in the dream realm because they have suppressed his memory, so he needs to bring Jason to raise fear. I feel like that was a clever plot device.
I do like that aspect. Yeah. I think that really added something to the movie. Kind of gave a good reason to get both characters in the same...
Exactly. A logical way to combine the two separate universes.
Yeah.
I think the nightmare scenes in this movie are actually pretty creepy.
And actually, speaking of continuity errors...
Oh boy.
If you want to be technical, Freddy vs. Jason fixes all of the continuity errors.
How so?
Because Freddy clearly states, after Jason does his first kill in the movie, that he had just been dreaming the whole time.
So you're saying any of the things about the movies that don't make any sense is just from Jason's dreams?
Yeah.
Easy peasy, just like that, kids.
Well, I mean, it explains it all.
Maybe that's what Part 9 was all about. Maybe that was just a weird, extended, incredibly lucid dream Jason had. That's not a bad theory, though. I like that theory. I'd buy that for $1.
I'd buy it for $2.
We haven't talked about the Nightmare series yet, though I think now that we've talked about the Friday series, we're going to have to do Nightmare soon. In the latter Freddy movies, the character got incredibly goofy, to the point where he's killing people with a Nintendo Power Glove. In this movie, he's still goofy, but it's been reeled back considerably.
I don't know. I mean, he does things like burns Freddy's back into the back of a kid.
Got your nose!
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how dialed back it was.
It's not as bad as parts 5 and 6.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Yeah, I feel like he's a little meaner. They really play up the whole thing of him being a molester. There's a lot of him sexually threatening the female characters. I don't really like the Freddy makeup, but Robert Englund is having the time of his life. He's having a ball. You can tell this was made by horror fans that were just joyous in order to bring this momentous occasion to life. Have these two iconic characters beat the shit out of each other. And they really beat the shit out of each other.
I would like to see the people who do the remakes. I think it's Platinum Dunes.
Yeah, Platinum Dunes own both characters as of now.
I think it would be pretty cool to see them do a Freddy vs. Jason with their Freddy and Jason. I know you don't really like the characters separately, but I think that their fast-paced horror style might really play well in the versus category.
Platinum Dunes would never do it because they don't know how to have fun with these characters. I would go see that, because of course I would. I'm kind of sick of the Platinum Dunes version of these characters. Anyway, Freddy vs. Jason. Jason looks great in the movie too. I love the black skin, and I love how tall Ken Krasinger is. That's great. Gore in this movie is pretty awesome.
Another favorite death scene of mine is when the guy gets impaled with a javelin.
Yeah.
And then it's
thrown up through the air, yes.
Just because you don't even know if he's dead or alive. You see him flying.
Jason electrocutes a guy. He crushes a dude with a door. Man, he just doesn't give a shit. He will kill you. The final fight was totally worth the wait, don't you think?
Yeah, although I would have liked to have seen more of a...
Always could have been longer, but I'm pretty happy with what we got. I mean, you have the characters switching weapons and really totally beating the shit out of each other. There's gore going everywhere. It's insane and violent and amazing.
Freddy should have won.
Jason wins.
But Freddy should have won.
But Jason wins.
Does he really? Because Freddy doesn't die.
Pretty sure Jason wins.
All I gotta say is Jason better not go back to sleep.
And let's face it, I think the script, as it was written, was pretty clear that Jason beats Freddy. Freddy gets impaled with his own arm, gets his head cut off. So technically that kill isn't Jason's. Woo. Monica Keena has one up on him on that department. And that last scene of Jason walking out of the lake carrying Freddy's head and Freddy winking at the camera, I think somebody said, well, we can't have Jason be declared the winner. That's going to piss off the Nightmare fans. So we got to have some sort of little stinger at the end to add some ambiguity. But has the whole movie been a dream? Is the last scene only a dream? Is Freddy still alive? Is he still alive in the dream world but dead in the real world?
Here's my thing. Once Freddy had Jason in the dream world, it was all over to begin with. It shouldn't have gone any further than that.
Well, that's because the main characters intercede and wake him up. Something fans bitched about is this whole thing about the movie says Jason is afraid of water. And all the hardcore Jason fans say, nuh-uh, because in this movie, he walks into the lake or whatever. However, I think it's made pretty clear that this is a subconscious fear of water he has, yes?
Yes.
And I do like the whole thing of Freddy being born in fire, Jason being born in water. It makes sense. It's thematic and fun. And now the alternate endings for the movie. Now, like I said, the ending we got is Freddy winking at the camera, but there were at least 3 other endings planned. One of the first endings the screenwriters came up with is Freddy and Jason have both been killed. They're in hell. They're in a hallway. They're running at each other. They're about to strike each other when chains come out of the wall, dig into both of their skin, pull them apart, and Pinhead comes up and says, "Do you gentlemen have a disagreement?" Which would have been awesome and amazing. Obviously, New Line didn't own the character of Pinhead, so they couldn't do that. But that would have been pretty fucking awesome, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
When that didn't work, they decided that they were going to have an ending like some sort of roaming panorama of hell, where Freddy and Jason are in a coliseum in hell being cheered on by demons, fighting each other for the rest of time, which I thought was a cool ending, a good compromise. That ending was also nixed for money reasons. And then there was another ending where the
hand from hell comes up out of the
hand
lake.
from hell comes up and drags a character down. And there was another one that they actually filmed where Laurie, Monica Keena's character, and Will, played by John Ritter's son, are macking in bed, and he grows Freddy claws, and I don't know. That was
she grows Freddy claws.
No, it's the boy. It's the guy. She gets her top torn open, which is admittedly quite nice, and Will grows Freddy claws and slashes her in the credits.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that.
I can put it in the DVD and prove you wrong. Anyway, I'm glad they didn't go that ending. That would have been retarded. And raised way more questions than it would have resolved. Should have been a franchise. We should be on part 10, Uber Jason versus Uber Freddy in space, you know?
Fucking A. I would definitely watch that movie. I would watch that movie in 3D just to say
it would have to be in 3D. In the post-millennium era, obviously horror remakes have been a thing. In particular, Platinum Dune's remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre started a trend of remakes. When that happened, Friday the 13th is one of those titles that got put on the list pretty quickly. Unsurprisingly, the Platinum Dunes company decided that they were going to do Jason next. In 2009, we finally got a new solo Friday the 13th movie, the first one in over 10 years. Simply called Friday the 13th, directed by Marcus Nespal, who made the Chainsaw Massacre remake and the Conan the Barbarian remake and a couple other shitty movies nobody saw. In this film, Jason is played by Derek Mears, who previously played a mutant in The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. What are your thoughts on this remake?
I like it. It's fast-paced. I like the direction that they're going with slasher movies now, and I know you'll disagree with me.
Probably.
But I like the direction that they're going now, where it's just a fast-paced, aggressive killer. Even in Scream 4, the killer just didn't give a shit. I like that direction, and I think it really adds something to the character. My favorite kill in the movie is the machete through the pier into the girl's head.
Oh yeah, that is probably my favorite. Though I like the running machete to the head in the beginning. But the pier, yeah, that's a good one. Or the black guy getting the axe in the back, and then Jason picks him up and throws him on his back so the blade goes in even further. Yeah, Jason is pretty awesome in this one. He's mean, he's intelligent because he sets up traps and does things like dangle sleeping bags over open flames. He has an underground secret base. We've got a running Jason this time. I like how aggressive and angry and violent, but not unreasonable Jason is. The most important thing for a Friday the 13th movie to me is gore, tits, atmosphere, Jason being a badass. And this movie delivers on all four of them. It makes me mad to admit that I like this movie as much as I did. Because I really hate everything Platinum Dune stands for, and I've really hated every other movie they've made, except for this one.
Even Nightmare on Elm Street?
I did not like the Elm Street remake at all. I thought it was pointless. Lots of nudity in this movie, speaking of which. There are 2 really graphic sex scenes in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
At the beginning with the girl getting it doggy style, and then the stupendous breast scene. And there's the topless skiing, and the movie obviously delivers in that regard, even though all the characters look like underwear models. And this is the problem I have with Platinum Dunes. All the characters are gorgeous. Even the nerd in this movie looks like he's from a Gap ad. I maintain that horror should be ugly. It has really all the trademarks of Platinum Dunes. Obviously, Crystal Lake has been moved to the deep south because all the surrounding townsfolk are toothless rednecks. There are a lot of obnoxious jump scares. There's a scene where a dog jumps out a door that admittedly got me when I saw this in the theater. Despite all that, it still works for, like I said, Jason's a badass, and the direction is pretty atmospheric. I'll give Marcus Nispel that. He can do shadows and fog and darkness in a way that looks interesting. Jason looks cool, too, don't you think so?
Yes, he looks awesome. What's really cool about this movie is they really combine, like the first 4.
They compress the entire first movie into 5 seconds at the beginning of the movie.
Which is fine with me.
Yeah, with his mom getting killed. And then you have Jason wearing the bag head look, but he's got that on a major chunk of the first part of the
Probably about the good first half hour.
Yeah. The whole concept of the teens vacationing at this vacation home on the lake is pretty much the plot of part 3. And then you have the brother, Jarrett Padalecki's character, trying to find his missing sister, which is one of the plot elements of part 4.
And then the missing sister puts on the sweater to convince.
Yeah, that happens as well. So the movie takes a lot from those first 4 movies, and I like that because it prevents it from being a straight remake. In a lot of ways, it just feels like another sequel. It still kind of draws from the franchise's history and references things that have happened. There are some things in the movie that made me scratch my head, like a mine shaft under Crystal Lake, because that makes sense. There's been a lot of debate that Jason wouldn't kidnap somebody. What do you say?
My philosophy is it was a remake. If they're going to remake the series, why not remake the character? You can't argue, well, that's not character when it's a remake.
Yeah, when it's a new interpretation of the character.
Yeah.
I agree, and why it might not be something old Jason would do, it's plausible. It kind of made me stop and say, I don't know about that, but I went with the rest of the movie. It didn't distract from me enjoying the film. The gore is mean-spirited, but awesome, as we have previously discussed. I have a lot of reservations about the movie, just because I don't really like the Platinum Dune style, but even gets somebody exploding out of the water at the end. It pretty much covers all the Friday the 13th bases.
Jason's death is pretty cool, too.
His death, in quotation marks, because he doesn't even stay dead for the rest of the movie. Though I hate that line when she says, say hello to mommy to me or something. I hate that. The Friday the 13th franchise has never been as complicated as Elm Street or Texas Chainsaw. I say that as a compliment. It's a simplistic series. Platinum Dunes bungled those two franchises by really missing the point. This one, they really didn't miss the point because it's a lot less demanding as a series. A successful film, made for $19 million, grossed $91 million, which kind of raises the question to me, where's the sequel?
The Platinum Dunes doesn't do sequels.
They don't, and that makes me mad. Why would you buy the rights to these characters that are famous for having long-running franchises, make one movie that's successful, and not do more of them? Why would you do that?
I don't know. Why would you?
Why would you just sit on the rights to these iconic characters? They're doing the same thing with Nightmare. They made one Nightmare movie, it was successful, and they refused to sequelize it for reasons that are stupid and arbitrary.
Well, we need another Freddy versus Jason movie, and it needs to have Pinhead.
What's going to happen with Friday the 13th is the same thing that's happened with Texas Chainsaw. Platinum Dunes is going to sit on the rights for a couple of years until they expire, and then another company is going to immediately snatch the rights up and make a new film. We have a new Chainsaw Massacre movie from a new production company coming out next January. And the same thing's going to happen with Friday the 13th. As soon as Platinum Dunes lose the rights, somebody else is going to grab it and going to make a new one. Now, there have been rumblings. People have been saying there might be a found footage Jason movie. What do you say about that, JD?
I say, please don't.
Could be interesting. We haven't really had a slasher movie like that as a found footage. There was the Leslie Vernon Behind the Mask, but that was a little different. I would go see it because it's Friday the 13th, and I'll go see it anyway. But I don't think it's the best direction for the series. I want to see Jason in the snow.
What is your obsession with Jason?
Because blood splattered on white snow looks awesome. Ask the Coen brothers.
Well, then why don't you have them fucking do Jason?
I would love to have an auteur Oscar-winning director make a Friday the 13th movie. That would be awesome.
You know who needs to do Freddy vs. Jason 2?
Who?
The Crank 2 guys.
Oh my god, you're right. Yes, oh my god, yes. All the crazy shit we want to see, it's going to be in that movie. Those guys are nuts. Yes, do it. Fucking do it. Quentin Tarantino said in an interview once he'd love to make a Friday the 13th movie. What do you think that would be like?
I love Tarantino like a brother, but I don't know.
It would be different. I was just saying on my blog, I would love to see somebody make a serious melodrama about Jason. Just give it a shot.
Well, I mean, if you're going to have somebody give it a shot, it might as well be Tarantino.
Obviously, the series is not dead. They will probably still be making Jason movies as long as we're alive and probably afterward, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Although, I would hate the fuckers who get to still be alive and see those movies.
Let's hope there are movie theaters in heaven. Or in hell. These films have made too much money. This character is too iconic. I don't think Jason's ever going to go away. Like Frankenstein and Dracula, before them, Freddy, Jason, Michael, all of them are iconic characters that are in the pop culture subconscious. What does Jason mean to you, Mr. Mash?
Jason means to me, and I've said it probably 2 times during this podcast, he's the epitome of all evil. And I think that Jason embodies everything that is wrong with the world.
And this is appealing?
Yes. I find it appealing because not only is it everything that's wrong with the world, but in a way, he is anti-bully. That is why he appeals to me. He's the epitome of all evil, and he is on an anti-bullying parade.
Yeah, I think that's why Jason is popular among outcasts and weirdos, the kind of people who are into horror. Because the popular kids in school aren't into horror. Not the same way we are. That's one of the reasons they're appealing. Jason is an outcast, he's picked on, and he's out for blood and revenge. It's a revenge fantasy. And that's certainly part of the appeal for me. And it's sort of interesting to say, well, man has no natural predator in today's world, so nature provides Jason as a predator to man. Obviously, if you want to get deep and Freudian with the character, you totally can. These movies, they seem superficial, and let's face it, they are superficial. But if you want to read a bunch of unnecessary, weird, psychological bullshit into it, you totally can. And that's the mark of an enduring film. Dare I say, a great film?
Dare you say it?
Dare I say it?
I Octodog dare you, bitch. Fucking say it.
I love the Friday the 13th movies. Jason's a great character, and some of the movies I would say are great. They're great.
Some of the movies are great, yes.
Some of them, yeah, not so great.
There are some of them that are awful, and then there are some of them that are on a whole level of awful that
They go
are.
back around and become awesome again.
When you can watch a Jason movie and laugh your ass off, I'm having a good time.
Well, I think that just about sums it up, Mr. Mash, wouldn't you say?
I would say so, Mr. Bangers.
How about we conclude the evening by smoking some joints and having some premarital sex? Not with each other.
We love premarital sex.
Yeah. Hey, did you hear that?